Today, guys, we got our hands on the brand new third generation of the Milwaukee M12 fuel ratchets. We've got the 3/8" version, the 1/4" drive version, and we've got some accessories to take a look at. With that said, let's get into the video. So guys, this has been a little bit of a long time coming. I believe we saw these originally introduced in July of last year at the ISN Tool Show in Orlando, Florida, then showcased at Pipeline, and then we saw them again in November at SEMA. Now, we only have the standard length 3/8 and 1/4" drive. The 1/2" and the long reach are a little delayed. All of them have been a little bit delayed. I believe they were supposed to drop around January, but they pushed back here to February. So we've got the 3053-21. That's the 3/8" drive. That's the kit that comes with the modular trigger cap system, an M12 charger, 1 CP 2.5 high output battery, and the ratchet body. We've got the 3052-21 1/4" drive. Same kit, 1 battery, 1 charger, the interchangeable triggers, and the 1/4" drive tool. We have the modular trigger cap kit. We looked at that at SEMA. We looked at that at ISN. We'll get into that a little bit later in the video, as well as we've got the 1/4" and 3/8 protective boots. This year, or this generation, they are different between the 1/4" and the 3/8. They are not the same as they were in prior generations. So one of the first things that most people, and myself included, noticed about this new third generation when we first saw it was how much more compact and how much more slender it was, especially back here where the grip is. And that is because of the redesigned brushless motor in this. It gives a smaller, more compact size to the motor while having good RPM, good speed, and good torque, but it allowed them to make the body smaller right here where the motor actually sits, as well as elongating the handle some. They stretch it out where they could make the grip section thinner, so it's not as bulky as in the older generations when it was up closer to the battery pack and had that bigger motor inside the clamshell. Now, as I stated at the start, there are slight variations, slight differences between the 1/4" and 3/8" drive version of these ratchets, and it's mainly up here in the actual ratchet head. A little bit thicker on the 3/8 versus the 1/4", and you know, the boot is different, as I said at the beginning. But other than that, it looks like it's pretty much the same. The 3/8 is a little bit taller, a little bit longer in this section, thicker as well, as I said, likely due to the increased torque demand of 3/8 fasteners and 3/8 socketry items versus that of 1/4". So the 1/4" could be a little bit slimmer, a little bit shorter than the 3/8 counterpart. Now, I can't recall offhand the differences in the long neck versions of those, or the long reach versions of these, but we'll have them pretty soon to take a look at. And I don't remember how much beefier, if at all, the 1/2" drive version was compared to the 3/8. So now let's do a little bit of a comparison between the first, second, and the new third generation of fuel ratchets. This is the original Gen 1 right here. Large bulbous head, thick handle on it. A lot of people had a lot of complaints about the head size getting into places, especially compared to competitors at the time, like the Snap-on 14.4s, that were smaller and slimmer than the Milwaukee. They were slower on their RPM, didn't have as much torque, and again, that larger section here where the handle was, a lot of people have complaints about that had smaller hands. Now, I can already hear you guys typing your comments below about small hands and gripping tools, but it was a complaint by quite a few users, as well as that paddle switch. They had that paddle switch on there. A lot of people didn't like it. I was one included in that dislike of the paddle switch, so that I grew to use it and you know, not see it as such of a pain. But coming from the Snap-on 14.4 ratchets with the button to the paddle was a little bit of a difference, especially when getting into tight areas near wiring harnesses or vacuum lines, things of that nature. You could easily snag them on that paddle, and it was a bit aggravating getting hung up on stuff. Well, the second generation was the high speed, where they greatly reduced the size of that head, and they made the overall tool smaller, a little more compact, and gave a lot more RPM to the ratchet compared to the first generation's slower RPM. Big improvement in speed, but the torque was a little bit less, and the length being a little bit smaller, you didn't get as much breakaway leverage when manually breaking a fastener free with the ratchet. Now with the third generation, they've kind of became a good combination of the speed of the high-speed second generation and the torque of the first generation slower speed. They revised that brushless motor, inverted it, if I remember right. I might have some clips left from SEMA and stuff I can pop in here as we talk about this, but they made that brushless motor much smaller, much slimmer. We're able to really shrink down that handle, get it even smaller than some air ratchets, if I recall correctly. It's been a while since I've touched an air ratchet, but I'm pretty sure this is slimmer than most of the 3/8 air ratchets I had from Snap-on back in the day, at least the body section, not so much the handle as it tapered down to an airline. But a lot of this is great in revision with the speed, the torque, the overall size, the ergonomics of it, the slenderness of the handle here, elongating that battery down so you don't have it as bulbous there in the middle. Just a lot of good things. And as you see, the big difference is the paddle is gone. We now have a button, but a caveat to that is now you have a choice. So in comes the modular trigger cap kit, the 49-16-3053 MTC, that allows you to customize the third generation ratchet to your particular liking. As I said, I was particular to the button style on the Snap-on ratchets of the time compared to the original paddles. A lot of people like the paddles, so you have the option to run the paddle switch on the new third generation. If you please, it actually comes with the ratchet as an extra option, or a included option, where you can pop it out in place of the button. And then there are several different buttons, 4 different ones you can choose from to tailor it to your specific taste and likes. And as you see right here, there's 2 different buttons now on my 1/4 3/8. I switched out from the factory included button. This is the factory included button. It's kind of humped in the front and the back, or the top and the bottom, depending on what you're looking at it. There is a ramp down button, as you see here, which I do greatly appreciate, and a ramp up button. Not a fan of that one, but you only have one kit, so I'm gonna have to buy another one to get that button for this one. There's also the slight downhill, not as aggressive, and then there is this one that's got a little bit of a smaller button than the others. Now, it's very easy to switch these out. We did a video again at SEMA demonstrating that. Really, all you gotta do is take a little pocket screwdriver, push down on that black button there, and when you do, you can slide this whole trigger or whole button up. Then all you do is pick what you want, orient it the correct way. You got a slot there, slide it down, it clips into place, so you can change out what button best fits your hand, or the old school paddle if you prefer. So much more comfortability, much more customization for how you work and how you like your tool to be in this third gen. So we'll touch on the boots just a little bit. I know a lot of people don't like to run boots. I like to run boots and protect my tools from getting beat up and scratched up. A lot of people think that's ridiculous or funny, that tools are meant to be abused and beat up and scratched up and all that, but I like to protect my tool. These boots also help keep trash out of the head, out of the mechanism, by covering up where the ratchet articulates back and forth. It keeps stuff from getting in there quite as much and keeps that buildup from, you know, gumming up the work, so to say. Another big revision, talking about the head and the boot, is right there on the back of the selector switch. You now have a grease zert where you can grease the heads and flush the old grease out. You know, if you drop it in a bucket of coolant, or you submerge it in fuel or diesel fuel, etc., drips on it, that's a solvent. It can wash that grease out. You can now grease and service these much easier with that included grease zerk, compared to the second and third generations. That head was basically sealed up and did not have that included zerk. And you know, the older, the second generation, the first generation had kind of a flat selector. A lot of people complained about it, that it was very hard to switch it, that if you had bigger fingers, you couldn't really get down in there and switch it from forward to reverse. So Milwaukee gave us a little bit of a step up and gave us that access to more easily reverse the direction of this ratchet. But if you look in line, it doesn't sit up higher than the neck right there, but it does protrude a little bit, and I think it's a little less pronounced with the boot on. Sorry, Milwaukee, this is the only mini grease gun I've got, but you see this is an air ratchet greaser with that small needle fitting on the end to easily inject the grease into the heads on these at that grease zerk at the back. This is a snap-on, obviously. Snap-ons, battery ratchets basically have all had that grease zerk in them the whole time, just because the electric ratchet head was basically the same as the pneumatic ratchet heads from Snap-on. They didn't change it around. They always had that grease zerk on them, but that's a new addition now on the 3rd gen for easier care, easier maintenance, and you know, just more tool longevity as a whole. So guys, there you have it, a quick reintroduction or more in-depth introduction to these new 3rd generation ratchets without the noise and chaos of a tool show going on in the background. We will be using these and abusing these and seeing how they hold up in future videos and future repairs. And this, I think, was just a nice little look at what is different and what is worth investing in this 3rd generation versus the 1st and the 2nd, and how far Milwaukee's power tools, especially the fuel line, have come in their battery technology, especially focused on these ratchets, which are my most used power tool by far, especially in engine bays, etc. on Subarus. It is so much nicer to put a socket on the end of this and push a button rather than have to torque back and forth and crank back and forth on a manual ratchet. Rarely do I use hand tools anymore because of how phenomenal Milwaukee is and how extensive their automotive line has become and how easy it makes day-to-day life in this trade, in this profession, and you know, just accelerates the productivity and makes things that much easier. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for future tool and Subaru content. I'll see you guys in the next one.